I'm so career oriented, and driven, competitive, all of that. To me, it was, let's achieve this goal, this level, this trophy, this what it is. And what I put secondary was my passion and my heart.
Hey, Nick Nanton here, and thanks for tuning in to Now to Next. I want to make sure you don't miss a single episode of this show on YouTube. So before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, just go into your settings and switch on notifications. Thanks for watching. Hey everyone, Nick Nanton here. After some technical difficulties, we got it worked out. I've got John Rivers here, the CEO and founder of Rivers Smokehouse, but he's so much more than that. I'll give you a brief bio, and then we'll dig in here. John Rivers is the founder of Rivers Smokehouse and also the CEO of Four Roots, an urban farm and agricultural education and food distribution center in Orlando, Florida. John's path to running the most successful barbecue chain in Florida is far from conventional. He is not a classically trained chef or graduate of culinary school, but rather spent 20 years in the healthcare industry, retiring as president of a billion-dollar company in order to pursue his lifelong dream of owning a restaurant. We'll ask if that's still his lifelong dream. Four Rivers Smokehouse began in 2004 as a barbecue ministry after John hosted a cookout to support a local family whose daughter was battling cancer. John spent the next several years smoking brisket out of his garage before opening his first restaurant in Orlando in 2009. Today, the 4R Restaurant Group has 22 locations in Florida. Four Rivers have been voted the best barbecue in the South by Southern Living magazine, and John has been named a finalist for the EY Entrepreneur of the Year Award 2 times. Through all the growth and success, John's barbecue ministry remains at the heart of his company's mission to lift up those in need and to support the local community. John Rivers, good to have you, my friend.
Nick, thank you so much. I always hate it when they read the bio like that, It's so dang embarrassing.
I get it. Well, it's well-deserved. So, look, I'm going to dig in probably a little different than where most people did. You clearly, we talked about it even in the bio, you had a successful career in the pharmaceutical world. And you and I were driving one time on a shoot, and you mentioned something to me that you were climbing the ladder corporately in that industry and in that company. And you said something interesting to me that you said, the day you got named president, you knew that you were done there. Yeah. Tell me a bit about that thought process of spending 20 years trying to get to a position and reaching the pinnacle of what you probably thought you always wanted. And then what was the thought process from there?
It's funny, Nick. You said exactly. It's what I thought I wanted. I'm so career oriented, and driven, competitive, all of that. To me, it was, let's achieve this goal, this level, this trophy, this what it is. And what I put secondary was my passion and my heart. And, and especially the last 3 years of my corporate career, I started doing the ministry and started cooking for people. And for goodness, 18 years prior to that, I was traveling all over the country, talking to barbecue pit masters about how they do brisket, trying to figure this out. And, and I look back and I'm like, wow, I could see where I was alive and I was just full of energy. And then I could see too, when I was going to work, the person Monday through Friday was a different person than Saturday and Sunday. And, the one thing I always tell people now, that the importance of that consistency, you've got to be doing what God intended you to do. You've got to follow your passion and follow your heart. Otherwise, if you don't have your heart into something, you're not going to perform as good as you could be. And you're certainly not going to fill that hole that you have burning in here, knowing there's something else you can do. And it was a click. It was right when I got that promotion, and I was in that role for 2 years. And I always say those were probably my least favorite 2 years of all the 20 back in healthcare. And, it came a day when I just decided, there was so much of a difference between the level of joy and energy and creativity that I was getting when I was thinking about cooking and thinking about running one day a smokehouse and doing the ministry, from the day to day of what I was doing on Monday through Friday. I said, I'm cheating the company. My heart's not here, so I resigned. I retired after, helping to build this business. And I never forget, my boss asked me the same question my wife did. She says, what are we going to do now? And yeah, the answer was, I don't know yet. But one of the lessons in that is sometimes you have to take yourself out of the wrong situation, to really truly allow yourself to find the right situation. And the longer that we hold on to that wrong scenario, be it a relationship, be it a job, be it whatever it is, you're preventing yourself to, being open to actually finding it, whether it comes to you or whether you now have the motivation to go and do it.
Absolutely. And I don't name drop, but I always give credit where credit is due. But my friend Jack Canfield often says, you got to let go of something good to be able to grab something great. And it's really tough. It's really easy advice to give to somebody else, but when it's you, it's really hard to take. It's, you're talking about, it was a goal you set and you achieved. I actually, I'm in a workout group, in a daily accountability workout group where we text every day a picture of us working out. And it's about 30 of us. We've been doing it for almost 10 years. And last year, I run quite a bit, but I don't have any major goals. I just try to stay fit. Any major running goals. I ran a half marathon, figured I could run a full marathon, just didn't want to spend the time doing it, on and on. But around October of last year, I realized I'd run 800 miles. And I was like, well, I'd never really set a goal to run 1,000 miles a year, but I bet I could do this. It's about, 50 miles a week for, 2 more months. And I made it to the end of the year, and I posted to my group that, hey, I just crossed over, I hit 1,002 miles, I think, on like the 30th of December. And one of the guys in there said, congrats, Nick, any insights on goal setting now that on that goal, now that you've accomplished it? I said, interestingly, I didn't set out to accomplish it as a goal, but once I saw it becoming achievable, I started shifting all of my workouts to where I could stop doing a lot of strength training. I just had to hit this goal of 1,000. And in the end, I'm not sure it was a smart thing to attain, because I started feeling really fatigued. Like my knees started to hurt more. I normally run about 20 miles a week, but then I was running maybe like 30. And I just, I think in a lot of cases, John, we set these goals that are almost irresponsible. In a way that we don't really understand what another mentor of mine, Dan Sullivan, called the strategic byproducts, like what's going to happen. And I think it's increasingly dangerous these days when most people's goals aren't really even for themselves. I didn't post it on Facebook. I didn't post it on Instagram because it wasn't for anybody else. It was for me. I find we're in a really interesting spot where people want to achieve things so that people can look at them, as opposed to achieving things that are really good for, their heart and their soul. And obviously you got that message loud and clear. I think one of the cool things about it is in 2004, you were running the oncology department for your company, and you found out about a little girl who was dealing with cancer, and you and your wife offered to help. Family, denied any monetary contribution, but they said you could host a barbecue and cook for them. You got 450 RSVPs. Okay, so let's talk about this moment for a second. The moment this guy in his backyard, in his garage, has been trying to perfect brisket, and I imagine you'd fed some number of people, but I can't imagine it was anywhere near 450. What do you do? So tell me how much brisket you prepared before that, and then what was your process to scale that to make sure you didn't just bomb this fundraiser?
Oh, Nick, dude, we had no plan. We had no idea. Literally, I had a Weber smoker in my backyard at that time, and I cooked, for 10, 12, maybe 15 people, and God knows it wasn't always good. It was really, there was one time we made a brisket starts this big, and the first time I smoked it at home, it ended up like a hockey puck. It was like this big, and we were watching a football game, and literally, I remember throwing it against the back wall of the house. It was so terrible, and that still didn't break it. We had no idea what we were doing, but it was okay. Just the exhilaration, the thrill of, man, we're doing this. We're going to feed these people. We're going to help this, little girl. And, what was really cool and the piece that's missing out of the story is just how the community came in. People started showing up, equipment started showing up. There was no way I could have done that on my own. And then quite honestly, some pretty amazing things happened. I remember one day, literally all I had in my backyard was, a little Weber. Monica, my wife, calls me up and says, hey, you better get home. And this was the week of the event. And I said, why? She says, oh, you'll see when you get here. So I race home from Lake Mary down to Winter Park. and I go to pull in my driveway, and literally I had to screech on the brakes because in my driveway was one of these, huge smokers, the big one, the big barrel ones with a trailer on it. And this is a true story, Nick. It had a yellow sticky on it, and I said, "Hey man, heard you need a smoker. Help yourself. Call me when you're done. I'll come pick it up." And I mean, and just crazy stuff like that. But that was when I started feeling like, hey, there's little signs that you get. You're like me. You're going to push yourself to a challenge, right. And it could be a crazy challenge, and that's the fun part of doing it, is proving that you can. But when you're doing something that is truly the right thing, things start to fall in place naturally. When you don't have to force it, you're on the right path. And that was the very beginning. I could tell you literally 100 stories like that, especially when we were trying to open and we had no clue what we were doing. It's just, things would fall into place naturally, and they still do today. I take a look at our executive team. I don't think I've never used a recruiter. Literally at the right time, the right person walks into my life, and I just know that it is, and then I know that we need it, and it all comes together.
I love it. So, brisket would take a master class to learn from you. You've perfected it. Only one question. I've never made a brisket. I'm going to attempt it. I have a big green egg and I have a pellet smoker. Which one would you use?
Oh, green egg, 100%.
Right.
Pellet's nice. Pellet is, I'm not going to get into the science of it, but, it makes it awfully convenient. And for the guy who's starting off smoking, 100% use it, until you get it down. When you go to a green egg is a kiln, and it just retains that heat so well. But, there's so much difference in the chemical compound when you start breaking down wood. We use the big logs on purpose. When you go from a log to a chip, to a little square, to a pellet, it changes every single time.
Good to know. All right. Well, I'll have to, maybe we'll have to film a master class with you one day on that. All right. So you then decide, you feed these 450 people, and things just start happening. You start doing this more and more. Just, it's sort of your ministry. You start, and you're doing this. You decide to quit your job, and you buy a little building. Those of you who know Orlando, it's a street called Fairbanks. You buy a little building because basically your wife's like, you got to get out of the garage, Don. You got to get out of the garage. Yeah. So tell me about this. So you buy this building, and you're going to make what, into like a commissary? Was this going to be where you're going to just make more brisket? I mean, what was the real plan for that building when you first bought it?
We were a mess, Nick. It's so funny. I always look back, and somebody told me a long time ago, don't write a business plan. And I remember coming out of Johnson & Johnson and running strategy for some years. You wrote multiple business plans during the year. And I said, well, what do you mean? What do you do? He says, you set yourself to a purpose. And then, he's very faith-based. He says, you let God work out the details of the plan. But the key thing that he was pointing out to me is that so many times when we think it's going to be X, Y, Z, and especially when we write it down, we tend to force ourselves to go down that path. And we miss all the opportunities, that come up around it. Now, you still have to have discipline. You got to still stay within the rails. But had we, at the time when we built that thing, when we started building it, we thought we were going to build a little commissary, literally to run the ministry out of, maybe run a little catering business out of. And gosh, we had these plans of manufacturing brisket and making sauce and all this stuff, which consequently we do today. But we had to become a restaurant first. And we opened up, and we had a little line, built in the front to serve people, and literally I remember telling my operating guy, I said, let's just set this up in case anybody walks in. And there were only 12 employees, when we opened the doors, and Monica's one and I was the other one. And people started coming in. Just, what it was all those years of serving the community. It's just, there's a beautiful symmetry between, it's a relationship. And any business has to have a relationship with its customer. And that relationship is not defined by a transaction. And if it is defined by a transaction, it will be replaced by a transaction. You've got to have that personal relationship with them. And all those years of serving them and helping them, it started to come back. And they felt like they knew me as they walked in the door, even though, gosh, I didn't know maybe 1/20th or 100th of them. And that's still the case today. And we take so much of our marketing effort, and it's get on the street, get out there, meet people, find out what their needs are, find out, what our customer group, what do they like? And can we go support what it is that they like? And that's how we build our business. But that little teeny commissary space, I got a phone call or I got a knock on the door from the city of Winter Park. God bless them. And they said, hey, you're licensed as a commissary, but there are people eating here. He said, you're a restaurant. And I said, well, we didn't intend to be. He says, you're not built like a restaurant. So we literally, months after we were open, had to put restrooms in. We had to put parking. We had to put all this stuff in. But hey, obviously it all came together the way it was supposed to.
It did. It's still one of my favorite locations. Obviously, what you did with it was incredible. Now our mutual friends, Hunger Street, are in there now too. What I always say about that location is the food. I think it's a really great crucible testing ground for a restaurant because it's painful to get there, painful to park. Like it's just painful. The food has to be crave worthy. If you're not willing to go the extra mile because you have to have that food, you're not going. But I think that's a great test for a restaurant, right? I mean,
yeah, absolutely. When you think back then in 2009, I mean, Fairbanks was not the Fairbanks it is today.
No, it still has a long way to go, but it's much better. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, the House of Hookah was the guiding star for the road.
Tell me this: during construction, you had a few hiccups. You poured $500,000 into it, and you got down to 60 days left of disposable income. Now, this is a really interesting thing that I've noticed as well. There have been so many times in my life when, just like as a college kid or just a young professional, like you're trying to make it. You're like, if you don't get that paycheck, you're probably not going to eat next week, right? Like you're just paycheck to paycheck. Then all of a sudden you reach this level of success, and that somehow your brain, whereas if you had 60 days worth of money in the bank in college or early career, you'd have been like, I am killing it right now. But the more successful you get to this. Will Smith, I was reading his book the other day, and he calls it the success paradox. When you're trying to hit success, you're grinding through the pain of making it, and when you get to a certain level, all you do is fear losing it. And there's this level now. So you're looking at the fact that I'm 60 days away from not having any disposable income, which is scary, but it's just so interesting how our brains go from one edge to the other. When you had that realization, what happened? What had to happen? Or did you just pray about it? I mean, what'd you do?
An awful lot of prayer. But, that's when you kick in, too. You're going to fight. It wasn't the first time in my life I was down like that. And I think that was a blessing as I look back. You ever hear that saying by Kierkegaard, 18th century theologian? He says, you live your life moving forward, but you tend to understand your life looking back. And, all those things that happen in your life, they're preparing you for when you have that. I'm convinced they prepare you for when you finally have that opportunity to achieve greatness, that you've got the courage or the strength or the know-how to get through that. Because, greatness, you got to go through a wall. If it's too easy, then everybody would be doing it. And you've got to be absolutely willing to fight, and you got to be willing to give it all up. And, when that 60 days kicked in, I did talk to my wife, because at the same time, the back end of that story is I got a phone call from my old boss, and he offered me a CEO role of 3 specialty pharmacies that they were going to combine the assets here in Orlando. And I went and I talked to her about it, and we knew what we were up against. And she said, you know what, John, this is an important part because you got to have that partner. She said, if you believe this is what God wants you to be doing, and this is the path, if this is what your heart is on, I'll stand by you even if we lose everything. And man, I tell you, that courage, that shot that it gave me was, I'm going to break this wall down. I'm actually going to no matter what it takes, I'm going to figure out a way to get this done. And it wasn't me. It was by the grace of God. People started stepping in from, again, just like that smoker showing up in my house. My contractor walks off the job, and, 2 weeks later, a guy in a Bible study, or a friend of mine who owns a construction company, shows up, and he gets me to CO. This is a really cool part. 59 of the 60 days before I ran out of money. We literally opened one day before we ran out of cash and capital. And then I remember the opening morning, because we didn't have any money to advertise, we didn't have any money to promote. There's no PR. It's just, hey man, we're just going to get these doors open and let's see what happens. And I told everybody, we said a prayer in the morning, all 12 of us. I said, I don't know what's going to happen at 11 o'clock when we open these doors, but we're going to give it everything we can. And man, people started showing up and they started coming in. And they started coming in and started coming in, and we were so flat-footed and so unprepared. Now that we're in the restaurant business and we know how to open places, I look back and I just like cringe. I had to laugh at some of the crazy things that we were doing. There were items on the menu, Nick, that I had put on there that I had in my head, okay, but we had never made them before. And I remember, I think it was like the cochon doulet. Some guest walks in and I'm the carver, in the front line, and I'm calling back to the back of things to make. And I said, okay, it's fried pickles. I said, fried pickles. And literally everybody in the back stops and they look at me like, how do we make those? Like, oh shit. And I'm calling back there, do this, try this. We were putting it together. But you know what though? You look back, those were the fun days. That's chasing your dream and chasing your passion. And there'll be a day when, like now, there's process, there's procedures, or so-and-so, and, you don't lose that. I pray you don't lose that competitive, creative streak. To me, you constantly, I'm a terrible operator. I'm a great developer and creator. And when the business is going great here, I get bored and I'll go kick something. I'll make it happen. And, quite honestly, during the COVID time, during 2020, that was probably one of the funnest years I've had. Running a business, because that opened so many doors. You had to be creative in order to survive. In every disruption, there's an opportunity. If you're willing to look at it that way, and that opportunity exists when you look at it from a different lens and a different perspective of, all right, we got to pivot big time, and that pivot may not be forever, but how do you maximize this situation? And a lot of the lessons that we learned during 2020. We're actually still doing them today, and they're helping us run a better business than we did in 2019.
Yeah, a lot of people, obviously it was an unnerving time for all of us because you didn't know what was going to happen next. And if you'd have told me that 2 years later, COVID was going to still be around, I would have laughed, right? But a friend of mine, Dean Jackson, just says, look, don't get emotional. Be the umpire. In every game, someone's going to be excited. It's in. Someone's going to be excited it's out. They're opposite teams. He said, you win when you become the umpire. Just call it as you see it and just adjust accordingly. And I think that's what you did, and that's great advice. All right, so you built up to over 20 restaurants. Tell me this. Obviously, you have a system and a process for it now. How hard was it to open the second one? Because you couldn't be at both of them at the same time. I've often heard the second one's the hardest in a lot of ways.
The second one was challenging. Now I'd built multiple businesses. Here's the blessing I had, and I ran business development and strategy and stuff for all these other companies. So I knew how to build a business, and it was probably 3, 4, 5 months into opening. And literally at that point, we're there every single day, all 6 days of the 7 days of the week. And I'm always the carver, and next to me is Jeff, my operating partner. And, and we got a system down. And one day I say to him, I said, hey, I got to run to Costco. Can you cover lunch today without me? And he says, sure. Yeah, I got it. And I went to Costco, and, he asked me the next day, we're up there carving. He says, hey, where'd you go yesterday? I said, I went to Costco, which I did. He says, what'd you buy? And I said, nothing. I said, I walked around like a nervous father, the wife giving the first birth for 2 hours, and I came back. I said, why'd you do that? And I put the knives down, and I look at him. I said, Jeff, I said, if I am here every single day, we will never grow. I've got to be able to pull myself away and to be able to watch the operation unfold and take place without me being there. So slowly over the next 120 days, started pulling away more and more and more. And what I was doing was looking for site number 2. And during that time, processes and procedures started to be defined.
Yeah, it makes total sense. During this time, you started seeing some different things happening in the food supply side of the business. Tell me when you first stopped just paying attention to let me make some barbecue to let me look at this whole food system or like what and tell me what you learned.
There's probably two influences in that. One is my wife, Monica, and this, little known oddity in the world is my wife is a vegan, and I serve, as much beef as I possibly can. Her 8-year transformation into healthy eating really, I watched it, and quite honestly, it helped heal my back. I've got some curvature in my back, and it's just because of the diet and getting inflammation out that it kind of was eye-opening. Like, wow, there's really something to this. So you had that happening, and then you had our foundation efforts. We were supporting a lot of global efforts. Then we pulled everything out and said, let's go ahead and focus on our backyard and see what a difference we can make in our own community. And started getting involved with school systems and really just learning about, seeing firsthand what the kids were eating in the public schools, and then learning the two factors changed, really pivoted for me. One, when I found out that 1 out of 5 students in our school system today, and this is not indicative just to Orlando, live in food insecurity. And I beg the question, well, what does food insecurity mean? And she says, well, this is typically the only food that they eat, the breakfast and the lunch that you get here. I said, what happens when they go home? There's not food for them. I said, what about the weekends? There's not always food for them. They gotta find it themselves. That part motivated me because there was a season in my life that I lived like that, and it touched my heart when it did that. And then the second thing, and this is what threw me over the edge. You think about all these people in around the whole state, around the whole country that are living in hunger. There must not be enough food, right? There must be not enough production that's out there. And we found out that in the state of Florida alone, okay, and this is not just for Florida, in the state of Florida on an annual basis, there's 1.8 billion pounds, or I'm sorry, 872 billion pounds of produce that goes to waste every single year on the fields, in the trucks, put in the landfills, or just gets thrown away. And this is before it even gets to the retailer, okay? So you take almost 1 billion pounds of produce that's going to waste, and you got 20% of our kids who aren't eating anything. I said, this is the challenge, and I love that. Everyone said, you can't fix the food system. I said, bunk, you can't. People told me you can't serve brisket in Florida. Bunk, you can't on that either. You know what? We're going to figure out how to do it. And it kicked in, and it's all from compassion too. This one's not for personal gain. I'm blessed with the business now, and that's going fantastic, and it's going to continue to grow. But now it's like, what has a bigger meaning in life than running a business and starting a business? And it's making an impact, and it's changing people's lives. And the thing that speaks to my heart is food, and it's food and it's health. And you start digging into it, you can't just give food away. And we learned this from my friend who's the president of Second Harvest. He said, John, I remember that he told me, he said, John, you can't food bank your way out of hunger. And I said, what does that mean? He says, John, we are giving away more food today than we ever have in our history as a food bank, yet hunger is at the very highest it's ever been. That's not the solution. You got to have it. It's an important part, but you're not going to fix the situation if you do that. And it comes back to education, and it comes back to awareness. You sit down with these kids and you start talking about the green beans. Do you like green beans? And they don't, some of them never had it before. Well, here, where's this from? Where does the green bean come from? From a can, from Publix, from the grocery store. Literally, and it's okay. It's not their fault. It's not their fault. No one's ever taught them that it actually comes from the ground. And it's so important, that relationship goes back once again to relationships. The relationship between us as a population and the earth and the planet, and protecting the soil and protecting the carbon count and what the food comes out of it. Make sure that it's healthy. When food starts to fall down, okay, when the distance between production and access increases, that's when you see communities begin to crumble. And today in the United States, our produce travels on average of 1,872 miles before it gets to our plate. And yet we have all this produce in here in Florida. And yet we have all these farmers. Farmers today, 330 farmers lose their property on average per week in the United States today. We're almost down to 2 million farms for the first time in post-Civil War days. And as a country, we just surpassed, this is not a good stat, we just surpassed the bringing in more produce than we're actually producing for ourselves. We just went over 51% of our produce that we eat today is actually imported. And it's just, there's so many factors that are going into this. So we're digging in, and it's a challenge, and it's a lot of fun too, learning. And that's part of the journey that people underestimate. If your heart's truly in it, those hard times that you go through, they're worth it because you're learning and you're enjoying, and it's more than just creating a business. Now you're truly doing something for a bigger purpose.
And in typical John Rivers fashion, you couldn't wonder about this behind the scenes of schools and other places. You decided to start an initiative called Four Roots, and tell us all about that. Tell us where it's at. Tell people how they can get involved.
It started with, we're just going to grow our own produce for all the school systems. And I remember telling that to another CEO of a restaurant brand here in town. He looked at me like I had three eyes. And it grew from that to saying, you know what? We need to educate students. We need to educate parents. We need to educate communities on where food comes from, the important role that it plays. We need to educate farmers on the importance of sustainable regenerative farming, to protect our soil. Today in the world, that 52% of our soil has been burned up and turned into dirt. And once it turns into dirt, you can no longer grow in it. Matter of fact, the World Health Organization shows us on a trajectory right now that in 60 years, we will run out of farmable soil. And in the United States, USDA shows we're running out in 50 years. And you put that in layman terms, that's 50 years of harvest left until our entire ecosystem requires a huge change. So, we took a look at it and we said, you can't just go in a silo and educate. You can't just go in a silo and give food away. You can't just go in a silo and teach farm. They're all connected. The food system goes literally from the seed all the way to the plate. And in that process, you've got so many constituents, from the researcher, from the fertilized company, from the farmer, to the wholesaler, to the distributor, to the chef, to the retailer, to Publix, to the mom and dad, to getting it to your plate. And in simple terms, we're creating a single table, a place, or placating, a single table where all those constituents can actually sit around and speak to each other. And as simple as that sounds, Nick, that doesn't happen today in the marketplace. The farmer is not talking to the chef, who's talking to the distributor, who's talking to the healthcare provider. And Lord knows, we're not prescribing food as medicine. And that's where medicine started. Was it Hippocrates that said, let thy food be thy medicine be thy food? And we've forgotten that. That's our goal. We've got a 40-acre facility that Dr. Phillips was so kind to grant us right on John Young Parkway. We're 2 miles away from downtown Orlando. It's a $55 million project, which Lord knows, I had no idea how we're going to raise $55 million, and we're almost at $20 million of it now. On the campus is everything from classrooms, where we're talking to one of the local junior colleges about moving their entire ag program onto our campus this year, to a farm-to-table restaurant, to a 300-person event center, to 8 styles of farming, from the number 1 hydroponic system in the world we're bringing in from Israel, to it's I forgot how long it is, almost a half a mile loop that we're creating for permaculture forest, where kids can actually walk through and everything around them is edible, everything that's growing. Then they actually go into the forest itself. To a culinary health institute. We're launching the Culinary Health Institute, the first one in the United States today. And the Culinary Health Institute is dedicated to the study of how to maximize and utilize food as actual medicine to coincide with co-treatment therapy cycles. And it's just, it's so exciting to see all these pieces coming together. And where we sit today, Nick, we broke ground at the end of last year in the fourth quarter. Buildings we're clearing sites right now. And if God allows and everything goes well with construction, it's already funded. We'll have classrooms up and we'll have students on our campus and farmers on our campus learning about sustainable regenerative practices by the end of this year.
I love all of that. Where can people go, John, to learn more about 4 Roots?
On the website, www.4rootsfarm, the number 4, rootsfarm.org. And there's an awful lot you can learn there, and lots of different ways to get involved, from even doing composting. We have a compost company now at your house. We'll come by and pick it up, to fresh delivery of, we call it the pharmacy, with an F, where we actually deliver boxes of fresh produce to your house once a week, from all the local farmers, to coming out to volunteering to help us serve the community. We're working with farmers. We're taking the produce in. We're creating meals, and we're going out and we're giving them to people who need them. And so far, we've given away just shy of 2 million meals, in the process of using what we're building, as a platform to help other people.
And that's where it starts. I always tell people, if you don't know what to do next, start serving, and the answers become real obvious real fast. So a great living example of that, John Rivers. I'll tell everyone who doesn't live in the Orlando area, come visit, come have some good barbecue, come check out 4 Roots. And John, thanks so much for joining me.
Hey, Nick, my pleasure. Good to see you, my friend.
You too. We'll see you guys next time on Now to Next. Take care. Hey, Nick Nanton here, and thanks for tuning in to Now to Next. I want to make sure you don't miss a single episode of this show on YouTube. So before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, just go into your settings and switch on notifications. Thanks for watching.